Mhm. Welcome, 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 everybody. I am Coach Cory Thorell, and this is Fear to Freedom, one story at a time, where change is not just possible, but it's already happening. And your story is unlocking the next chapter of your journey. And as I always do, I start each episode with a powerful question. And this time, that question is, what if the moment you lost everything was not your breaking point, but your initiation into the kind of leadership or clarity and power that never could have accessed in any other way? Today, I am honored and thrilled. My guest is a powerhouse in the world of business and transformation. Jay Jackson is the chief of disruption at Disruptive Leaders Alliance, where he helps other thought leaders and coaches and experts multiply their businesses and grow their dreams into a tangible reality. Jay Jackson, welcome to Fear to Freedom. I am so tickled to be back with you again. Say hello and introduce yourself, my friend.
So first and foremost, thank you, Cory, for having me on your show. I'm super excited and grateful for the opportunity to serve everyone who's out there listening to my voice right now. I thank you for showing up and just being a part of this journey with Cory. And I think we're going to have a phenomenal experience throughout this show. And we want to take you on a journey and on a ride of transformation. So I'm just honored to be here.
Absolutely. Well, Jay, I'm so tickled to have you. You and I met a couple of weeks ago, and we had a little exchange. I had the privilege of being a guest on your show, which is where I think I made a friend for life.
Yeah, I
We've
appreciate it.
we've
Same
been
here.
in communication since then, and we decided to have you return the favor on my show. So thank you for that awesome opportunity. Um, the show, Fear to Freedom. I have a passion about this topic, being a coach, a guide, a healer, self mastery, high performance, helping people rediscover their power. That's what I do in my practice. And I know that you give a very similar gift in your world. Tell us just a little bit about what goes on in your business and how you help people.
Yeah, so specifically for me, Cory, it's about helping coaches, experts, and thought leaders work less to profit more. And it's a shift in thoughts and identity. And that shift is necessary because if we don't shift our identity and our thoughts, we will always stay the way that things currently are. And so for me, it's about helping those who have a mission and or a purpose achieve their mission and purpose in life. It's because I believe that serving and helping people and solving problems is why we were here. That's just my belief as to why we're here on this spinning blue planet. And when we do that, it's natural that we're going to make an impact on people's lives. And when we make that impact, we prosper. And that prosperity is financially, relationally, in our health, and even in the experiences that we have. And so we just try to live those three values: serve, impact, and prosper. And we try to impart the philosophy of working less to profit more because we understand that it's really about you creating an empire or your own money making machine that you can now have systems, processes, a team in place so that you can actually profit more, both financially and have the time and money freedom to enjoy, those that you love and the things you love to do.
Right on,
Yeah.
right on. In my world, I came from a world of big show business, where uh, we learned how to manifest on demand in that world, working for the boss. In show business, there was never enough money, time, or energy. But somehow, opening night, the curtain always goes out with everything in place,
Sure.
And then it came time for me to chase a different dream, which is what I'm doing now. And my own journey, I left the day job with this constant paycheck and the benefits and all of those things, and that gigantic leap of faith,
Yeah.
rely on just me, and there was an identity shift there for sure,
Right.
from
Yeah.
going from an employee to being an entrepreneur, from the safety of a check coming every 2 weeks to where's my next check that I create coming from. I have
Yeah.
to do those things. And that was a huge identity shift
For sure.
for me. And of course, part of that journey for me was not only did I have the dream, I've always wanted to do this. This has been a back burner issue for me for my whole life. but that next piece was, do I get to? Do I deserve it? Am I worthy? Am I good enough? Am I
Yeah.
capable? Do I,
Yeah.
all of this self-doubt. Then, of course, all of my shadow work and my woundedness,
Yeah.
boy, did it come up full steam. And as a guide, as a coach, I really understand that I can only really help take a client as far as I'm willing to go. You know,
Absolutely.
so of course, all the training that I've had that gave me the tools to work on myself.
Yeah.
And I know that you have a very similar journey, and so now here you have a business, I have a business, we're doing this, we're serving people, and you and I both have this amazing reward of watching our people, our tribe, our clients reclaim that personal power. And boy, what a gift
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
see people to strive to thrive and then thrive.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, unfortunately for me, I wasn't able to take the leap. I was kicked out of the Eagles nest. So the Department of Defense did a drawdown in manpower back in 2014 because of the ending of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. And so about 250,000 of us had to find, like, what are you going to do with the rest of your life?
Yeah.
And when you're someone like me who's very mission driven, purpose driven, I actually bought in, right? I was all in. And so for this to happen, for me at the time, I thought it was to me. But for this to happen for me, I now realize that it was the greatest thing that ever happened for me. Even though I went through stress, depression, I had to deal with not only, wounds from childhood and trauma and things of that nature. I also had to deal with the wounds that I gained while, in the military for 15 years. And so, you go through this process where I was once a civilian, I became a military member, and now I'm having to learn how to be a civilian again as an adult. On top of that, what's my new mission? A lot of times veterans commit suicide. There's an average 22 per day because, and I believe this is Jay's belief from my own personal experience and even conversations with others. We struggle because we don't have that new mission. We struggle because we can't create that new identity. And so it's like, what's my purpose, for living? And so that has been what has fueled me, Cory, since getting out of the military a little over 10 years ago. It's just the new mission, the new purpose, the creation of my new identity. I once heard the late great Jim Rohn talk about it's not about you just becoming a millionaire. It's about who you become in the process. And so
Yes.
I just fell in love with, those two ideas, just, hey, grow to become the best that you could possibly be. But at the same time, you're going to put yourself in a position to make a huge impact on people's lives. And I just don't think there's any greater marriage than that, where you're solving, problems and helping people. But at the same time, there's, the fulfillment, there's the financial reward, there's the relational reward. And so I think, the greatest thing that ever happened to me was going through that experience. Now, it's not easy, and I can stand here and smile and say how great life is now, but there were times where it was very dark, it was very cold and very wet, mentally. And I'm just kind of using that, as an analogy to get people to kind of vividly see it. But there were some moments where I thought about, like, why am I here? What's my purpose for being here? What do you want me to do now? And I was brought up in the religious parameters of Christianity, Southern Baptist particular. So of course my thoughts immediately went, why God? Why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
But then as I've grown and matured over the last few years, I've come to discover that nothing happened to me at all. Everything happened for me. And so it's truly, like, back to your question that you posed at the beginning of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that was truly my catalyst. Like, that was truly the experience that I needed to go through in order for me to grow, to become the leader that I am today. To be able to serve, not just my clients, but to also be able to be the husband that my wife needs me to be, the father that my children need me to be, the grandfather that my new grandbaby needs me to be. And so It's been a phenomenal journey. I have zero regrets. You talked about the shadow work. You talked about just the deep inner work to focus on mastery. I think that has been the most refreshing part of it for me, is being able to be in an experience, but not allow the experience to be in me. And so it allows me to kind of see everything and kind of go, okay, I understand this is the state of affairs for this particular person, or that emotional intelligence, so I can understand the affairs of this person, and I can take a step back and not allow myself to become controlled by what, they may be dealing with. So it's just the growth, man, the transformation, the learning, the discovery. It's just all been amazing.
Right on. A
Yeah.
couple things that are sparking for me is, I left show business sooner than I was ready
Okay.
because I got fired,
Ah,
and it was
yeah.
interesting to me because I got fired on somebody else's lie. And so,
Okay.
of course, that was another dagger in my heart. So I went and fought back, and then they couldn't prove the lie. And so I was able to resign instead,
Ah,
but still, I wasn't ready.
gotcha.
Oh, and of course, there was a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of toxic negativity. And there was reason to leave, and I knew I was going to leave,
Right.
but I got pushed out too soon.
I
I
got you.
wasn't ready to stand on my own 2 feet when I left. So you and I have that in
It's
common.
a
Is
similar
all
story.
of a sudden,
Yeah.
that the rug was pulled out from underneath me and you, and it's like, okay, well now I still have to pay the bills,
Yeah.
chop the wood, carry the water, take care of things. And man, oh man, oh man, doing all of that and being hurt. Like,
Yeah.
I had to, I hadn't really manifested the next dream. I sort of knew where I was going to go, but I hadn't created it,
Right.
and so that's what I want to talk about up next is like, when I'm working with my clients, especially if they're working with struggle or trauma, or they're really finally uncomfortable enough to entertain a change,
Hmm.
a lot of those folks have been so frightened by the world, or so stable in the suffering that they're in, like a job
Hmm.
they can't stand, but they can't afford to quit,
Right.
or a relationship they can't leave because whatever reason. There was no dream, there was no obvious next step, there was nothing, no light at the end of the tunnel, not even an awareness that we were in the tunnel.
Right. For
And
sure.
all of a sudden, the next option, the next action was necessary now. And all of a sudden I got really scared.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, whoa, what do I do? What if, what about, oh my gosh, which is reaction.
Right.
I think we talked about this last week. I think one of my biggest gifts that I bring is the difference between reacting to the world and creating in the world. When we react, we give our power away.
Mm.
Usually it's subconscious or unconscious behaviors that we learned from our family, our tribe, our
Yeah.
community,
Yeah.
which is fear-based, scarcity-based, or based in negativity.
Right.
And we do that because it's normal, it's familiar, and we know how.
Right.
And that fear can be crippling. How do we
Yeah.
dream about tomorrow when today is so hard?
For sure.
I don't dare dream anymore about tomorrow because what if it doesn't come true? I can't bear the thought of today getting worse. But really, I think the solution, the gift, the magic, the relief is in the power to daydream about tomorrow, to re-engage the creative fire in your bellies, to say there is hope, and hope creates vision, and vision creates motivation, and motivation creates action, and then action manifests it.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think a lot of us didn't have that dream. you
Yeah.
know
Well, I mean, it's so I look at the story of how John D. Rockefeller, who is one of the
yeah,
founders
yeah,
of the General Board of Education,
yep,
and he says, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. And
yep,
so I think, like you said, we've been conditioned intentionally by some, and and I'm not limiting this to John Rockefeller by any stretch, because I know that there are many others,
many
but
others.
intentionally by some, and then unintentionally by those who are just not aware.
Yeah,
And, for those who intentionally do it, I think those are the true, real weapons of mass destruction, because I think intentionally implement systematic things to keep people marginalized or in fear-based scarcity, mentalities. But then for those that are unaware, like for me, there was a point in time where I used to be really upset with like my family, my grandmother, my aunts, uncles, moms, and I was like, because I was introducing, discovering, new information and new perspectives and new ways of, seeing myself in life. And I was like, why didn't you guys tell me any of this? And then immediately like, well, they didn't know themselves, right? And so oftentimes we just have to be able to, like you said, you meet people where they are, and then you hold space for them, and you just be that leader or you be that guide that you wish you had when you were in that particular position.
For sure.
And so when you talk, and then also I kind of touch on the next point when you talk about, remaining present, but being able to maintain the vision and manifest, what's going to come. I like to tell people, like, I'm a huge tennis fan. My wife and I, we sit down and we watch all the major championships.
Yep.
We struggle with the Australian because of the time zone, but we watch most all the major tennis
Yep.
championships. But as we watch tennis, I look at life, in terms of those who are visionaries, like a tennis match, where you have to be able to bounce between each side of the net. That means I have to be able to see the future, maintain the vision, and trust and believe that if I continue to work, that what I see out into the distance will eventually become the present. And so
Yes.
with that, we can't put any limitations on it because once you begin to put scarcity and limitations on it, now you've capped, the God, universe, whatever, you believe and follow. You now put a lid on what's capable, and there are no limitations to anything. So that's the abundance, perspective. But then on the opposite side, you got to stay practical, you got to stay real, and you got to stay grounded, right? And so that's the thing that I love about helping my clients with is like, let's make sure that the present is taken care of in terms of, consistent lead flow, consistent sales, consistent cash coming into your business so that you can, focus on the present. But at the same time, you're now building up the resources you need to make sure that the future can then, be able to manifest itself. And so, yeah, it's a challenge to keep the ball from hitting the net. It's a challenge to keep the ball from going out of bounds. But then, and again, that's when I say to people, that's where the team comes into play. You got the coaches up in the box, you got the umpire. Everybody has to work together and collaborate and be in an alliance. That way, you can help make your journey a lot easier. I tell people all the time, you can collapse time, whenever you have the right resources, support, and team around
Yes.
you.
Yes. I love the idea of collapsing time.
Yeah. 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 It's
Especially when, if there's fear on the table, which
yeah,
is creating urgency,
for sure.
and one of the things I love about redefining fear, a new definition of fear is that it is simple and it is proof of ignorance.
Mm.
Fear is nothing more than the need to know something that you don't know right now.
Yeah. You lack knowledge and information for sure.
Right, which stops us in our tracks.
Yeah.
Like, and I love this about fear, this once again, I didn't know this until you know it, is that when we're afraid and you're not in that immediate danger, like a saber-toothed tiger is not eating your belly.
Right.
You're not, or you're at gunpoint or being robbed or something like that.
Right.
You're not in immediate danger. But what happens when our reticular activating system, we get a massive rush of endorphins,
Mhm.
and all of our senses go from 5 to 100. Like, boom, we see in detail, we hear everything, we smell, taste, feel, know so much information at once.
Mhm.
And that's the overwhelm of fear.
Mhm.
So now I'm going to talk to the cognitive mind and say, okay, your thinking mind, this is what's going on when fear kicks in. But if you're not in immediate danger, and you can say, all right, I give overwhelm permission to download a massive media file right now,
Mhm.
and let it take your breath away. Because you do all of a sudden see in ridiculous detail. You see so much more than you would have seen. You hear things, feel, know, whatever it is. you download the information that you're actually seeking
Mm.
all at once. And then, oh, excuse me, and then sift and sort one detail at a time as it makes sense or what's obvious in that journey. But this is where fear becomes an ally. Fear becomes your number one knight in shining armor. Most of
Mm.
us are trained to think, oh my gosh, I'm scared. I'm not allowed to do anything except plug my ears, hide under the blankets, and shake under the bed. Don't
Right.
don't do anything. Freeze solid, because that's what we're taught to do. And that being said, Jay, I think that our world right now, like especially in 2025, I think the world's on fire with reacting in fear or reacting in ignorance. And I think,
Mm.
like so many of the powers that be, they want us to be helpless, hopeless, and to go home and shake under the bed.
Right.
Like once again, that's like, don't be the shepherd, stay the sheep. Don't think for yourself. Or like Rockefeller, don't be a thinker, be a worker, because that way I stay rich and you work for me, or you stay guilty and you give me your money, or whatever that system that has been alive on planet Earth for centuries.
Yeah. Well, and like now I'm at a place right now where because I understand that that is a system, right? I have the knowledge and understanding and the wisdom that there is a system and that there has been intent by some to, keep others down. I step back and I say to people, for me, the system isn't broken by any stretch of the imagination. The system is operating exactly according to design. And
Yeah.
so when you understand that, you now have to make a decision. Do I continue to allow the system to operate as designed and I go back to the status quo? Or do I allow the system to operate as designed and then I make whatever adjustments I need to make to create a better economy, for example, or financial ecosystem for myself, my family, and my friends? And then, of course, we all try to make sure we help as many people as we possibly can,
Yeah.
right? And so once I realized that, I was just like, look, I don't even want to play, that game anymore because
Yeah.
clearly that game has gotten me what I've been getting up until this point. And I don't consider myself to be insane by any stretch of the imagination.
Uh-huh.
But again, back to your point earlier, the pain has to become severe enough. Like most people won't make change until they've either been inspired to change or they've become extremely desperate for change. And
Yes.
again, I'm speaking from experience, so I'm not, on my high horse by any stretch of the imagination. But that change is necessary if we want to change our results. And so I tell people like you can, we know that we've been conditioned uh, to think lack, loneliness, limitation, guilt, fear. We've been conditioned, to be and operate that way from most of our culture.
Yeah.
Not saying all, but a huge percentage, 98 to 99% of humanity, right? The numbers don't lie. But I do believe that there have been people, just family, friends, and even mentors who are laying the clues, right? Success leaves clues. And so
Big time.
if you want to have something different, find someone who's doing what you want to do, and model their behavior, right? And if you really want to collapse time, pay them, and I can guarantee you'll get the results and the knowledge you
So
need
true.
really fast.
So true. So like this human condition of overreacting, which is everywhere right now, giving your
Right,
power away. When we react, we give our power away.
right.
Then there's that switchcraft moment when you remember that you are giving your power away and you start to create instead, reaction or creation, that switchcraft moment. But I think this phrase I learned from one of my heroes a long time ago, normalizing the abnormal, like staying in
Mm,
a constant state of fear and just saying, this is how my life is,
right.
and surrendering to that. When, okay, we do that, we all do it, we all learn this lesson. Nobody gets out of learning this lesson. I think that's part of like being a spirit that comes to have a human experience. Part of that journey is to forget, to suffer, to understand pain and love, and then remember. This is when we do our healing, we start to return to ourselves and we rise above. And we see this same story in all of the major religions, and the major spiritual mentors are telling the same story with their own their own ecology
Mm,
infused in their version of the same story.
yeah,
But I see
yeah.
the same story.
It's funny you say that because I look at some, although, let me kind of caveat, although I understand there are allegories and there's poetry within the books and stories of the Bible.
Yeah.
Uh, I also still believe that some of the stories that you can read in some of the ancient texts are identical to stories that happen in modern day time. But
Yes.
yeah, most people, one, won't read the book.
Uh-huh.
But then those who do read the book, it's too mystical or it's too magical for some folks. So it's impossible for this to either have happened or it's impossible for me to practically apply these things in my real life.
To
And
find the relevance. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So I used to be one of those skeptics until I got to a place when I was transitioning out of the military. I had two separate experiences that challenged my paradigm around what is reality or what is God or what is creation.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And the first experience, I was a leader within the church and I led the overall church's outreach ministry. And I
Uh-huh.
won't go into all of the details, but there was a conflict that occurred between myself and one of the family members hierarchy of the church. And the conflict for me was something that was very easily solved just by having a conversation. But I learned that there were conversations that I wasn't included in. And so then once I was included, I realized that decisions had already been made and I didn't have the opportunity to even be a part of the decision-making process.
Sure.
So I said, okay, wow, I really I was naive in my belief that they weren't human or that they um, were somehow anointed with some special powers and didn't have the human element of them to either gossip, lie, bend the truth, any of those things.
Yeah.
And so that was one experience that made me take a step back and really, begin to question, well, God, what is it that you really want me to do? Like, why am I here? This is around the time I'm transitioning out of the military. And as I started to study psychology more and I started to study different spiritual texts and I went down several rabbit holes, I started to realize that everything truly is your mental conditioning. Nothing else matters outside of from the moment of conception until present moment right now. You are a collection of everything that you have, as you said, seen, heard, smell, taste, touch,
Uh-huh.
right? And so that was one experience. The second experience was in the same context was a retreat called Trace Diaz. And in this particular retreat, it was about your own personal growth and your own, transformation, reconnecting you with God. And because I had already started to study psychology and understand that, or beginning to learn and discover that everything was about human conditioning, I began to see everything through the lens of I'm going to protect this, I'm going to protect this, I'm just going to protect everything that goes, my body, my everything. And so once I got there, we weren't there an hour. And I began to see the ritual of the experience called Trace Diaz play out in a way to where I went, hmm, that is conditioning. So, for example, what they wanted us to do was all join hands and across the aisle, and we were swaying back and forth, and we were basically to sing together in like a little mantra, "Come to Jesus, come." And I sat there and I was like, "No, I'm not interested in this right now. No." And
Uh-huh.
so, that was night one. And then they had some little things where they rung cowbells. They wanted us to line up in single file lines. Um, then the next night, or no, the next morning, and this is when I honestly bolted. The very next morning, we got ready to go into a room, and there was a guy in the back of the room playing guitar. And he had a microphone, and he was just saying, uh, Jesus is your Lord. Focus on my voice. Listen to nothing else. Jesus is your Lord. And at that moment, I lost the cord. I'm like, okay, I'm out of here.
Right.
So Long story short, that's it's just those two experiences are what kind of spurred me. And I talked about it earlier, either inspired or you're now desperate for change. And so those are the two experiences made me very desperate. They forced me to be open-minded to what is life, who I am, that all things we were taught are truly, intentional or unintentionally taught to us, and then be more intentional about you yourself, putting yourself in environments around people, different places, and different things that will nourish you 24/7. Like I tell people, and I kind of had an exchange with someone on social media where I had to explain to him where he was like, well, I just don't want to be around people who can never turn it off. And I'm like, yeah, like there's no off button on me when it comes to my growth, when it comes to me learning, when it comes to me changing and evolving, because that's why I'm here. Like my job is to become the greatest version that I could possibly become of me, right? And so I don't ever want to turn that off. And so I just challenge everyone who's listening to this to implement some kind of program of your own kind, right? Some kind of conditioning of your own kind. You talk about NLP, being something. I'm a huge fan of NLP, and I'm a huge fan of it because I understand that on a cognitive level, everything has changed for me. Not well, and I wouldn't say everything, but a large amount of things have changed and transformed for me. There are still some, limiting beliefs that I think we'll all have until the day we transition out of here. No one doesn't have any limiting beliefs. I
Absolutely.
don't care what anyone says. But there's still some limiting beliefs. There's still, some things that about myself that I'm trying to discover and learn and grow every single day. But I challenge everybody to create your own, kind of conditioning program, because when you do, your life will change, your skill set, your talents, your relationships, your whole entire world will change.
For sure. So a couple of things that are popping from our chat so far is, the conditioning of our ecology. One of the, I was raised in Salt Lake City, and my father's side of the family were very, very LDS Mormon,
I
but we
believe you.
were not.
Yeah, I believe you.
Yeah, we were not Mormon. My dad didn't go on a mission, got my mom pregnant. They had to get married. So we were always Dave's kids. Dun dun.
Oh, wow.
So outside, we were not, well, we were welcome there, but not really,
I
you know,
got you. I got
polite
you.
for sure. They are the most loving people ever, but we were not ever part of that.
You weren't in the
Went
cool
to
kids club.
Lutheran parochial school, private school, and it was the very conservative branch, which was hellfire and damnation.
Right.
And I've often said that I never came out as a gay man because I never went in.
I got you. I,
And so as a young gay person in the early 70s growing up, there was no role models. There was no positive, good examples anywhere to be found. It was pure fear. It was pure
mm,
danger. It was pure, I mean, it was dangerous.
yeah, bigotry.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
and the reason I'm bringing that up is because we would hear this ideal of um, unconditional love. What a great
Mm,
idea. Great
right.
idea.
Right.
But the people that were teaching it using hate to teach love.
Right.
Unconditional love if dot
Yeah.
dot dot.
Yeah, for sure.
And so as a young gay person who didn't have the savvy at the time to talk about it, I didn't have the world experience to talk about it, but I was certainly feeling it.
Right.
My earliest recognitions was you're using love to teach hate.
Mm. To
And so
justify
I
your
didn't
hate.
feel safe.
Yeah.
So therefore, I've lived in fear
Gotcha.
and normalized that fear to the point where I was unconscious of it for a really long time. And I found my way into show business, not because of my amazing passion and life hobby of wanting to do show business, but it was the only safe place that I knew where gay people could thrive.
I believe you. Gotcha.
And it took me a long time to even realize that that's why I wasn't getting along with everybody in show business, was because I was playing by very different rules.
Yeah, for sure.
But it was that unconditional love if. creating fear, creating uncertainty. And then what that did for me is starting to compare all of the world religions, because I was always very spiritual.
Mm.
Man, like standing in the trees or the desert or Mother Earth or the ocean, I could feel spirit moving through me. There was something
Right.
that said, Cory, keep doing what you're doing. You're okay. Which is why I say I never came out of the closet, because I never went in.
I got you.
Right. So then I studied cultural anthropology, because I really believe that we are more alike as humans than we could ever be different, which is our emotions, the language of our emotions. My pain and your pain are painful. My attraction and your attraction are ridiculous. Our joy is wonderful. Our gratitude is soothing. Our frustration is nerving. We all have this in common,
Right.
which is one of the reasons why I think you do what you do, I do what I do. Let's meet people where they're at and put out that helping hand. And I love Lisa Nichols, she has a quote: I climbed out of my story. I'm standing on top of my story, and I'm putting my hand out for the next one who is ready.
Mm.
And I think there's such eloquence and simplicity, because as we rise and we heal, of course we step into service.
Yeah.
Of course we do. Because especially for those of us who have kids, or around children, we want them to have a shorter road than we had.
Absolutely.
For
Absolutely.
for sure.
Yeah.
So that's why I created this podcast, The Theater of Freedom, one story at a time, because I really believe that we're taught to stay unconscious. We're literally told, do not daydream. It's a waste of time. Do not daydream, focus. But what I believe is, what could possibly be more important than daydreaming about your life, your future, your own story? And the, there's, I don't know if I, okay, yeah. So there's, if you were to go to any healer anywhere in the world, like shamanism, ancient healing, this is one of the things I study in cultural anthropology, is the healing rituals of humanity.
Right.
And this is true on all continents throughout time and space. In the olden days, if you were to go to a healer with your suffering, they would not ask you what is wrong. They would ask you 4 questions. And the first question is, when in your suffering did you stop singing? Because singing is our highest form of prayer. All of the churches, all of the religions, all of us have a unique voice that is only our own. No other voice like our fingerprints and our eyes. It is our own frequency. And when we sing, we are asking for what we need, or we are celebrating what we have. And I love that. So when in your suffering did you stop singing?
Okay.
And then the second one is, they would ask you, when in your suffering did you stop dancing? This
Okay.
is a relationship with our body. And I love this so much, because it's, when we're dancing, we're actually stomping on the earth, which creates the heartbeat in the drum. And there's, the Japanese have 2 sides of this. The Japanese style of dance called buto, which is the pounding on the earth,
Mm-hmm.
putting it back, and we're pulling it up, it's the beat.
Right.
So the buyo, which is where the ballerina goes and stops before she comes back down. It's the top of the arc, the top of the leap, which creates breath, down, up. Now it's our breath. So
Hmm.
in your suffering, did you stop dancing or breathing? And the third one is, when in your suffering did you stop being curious and mystified about your own life story?
Hmm. Yeah.
Dreaming about your story. When did you stop dreaming about your life? Because we manifest what we think about.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And then the fourth one is, when in your suffering did you become uncomfortable in the sweet territory of silence?
Hmm.
The pause, the gap in between. So I wanted to, that just popped into my head. I didn't know I was going to share that with you today, but I think it's relevant to the journey that we're talking about with
Yeah.
the audience here.
Yeah.
The
I mean,
return.
it's I think we all have, like you said, there's one of my favorite books by Keith Craft, Pastor Keith Craft. It's called Your Divine Fingerprint.
Oh,
And within this book, he talks about how during an ejaculation, there's like 4 million sperm cells.
uh-huh.
And he says, of course, that each of those sperm cells are racing against each other to get to the egg.
Yep.
And he always says that you're the one, like you're the one that made it.
Yeah.
And anytime I go into a momentary state of, having to go back and remind myself of who I am and asking
Yep.
those questions, I always kind of refer back to that and like you're the one, like you defeated 3,999,999 other people, right?
Yeah.
And that means you've been a winner from day one. And so I try to help people kind of keep it in that space where you never have to even ask those questions because you're always, thinking and operating with, I'm the one, I'm the winner, I'm the one that was chosen to be here in this present moment in time.
Hmm.
No one can do it as well as I can do it because my voice is the voice that my people can hear. My dancing, is the dance that my people want to dance.
Yeah.
And so I love that. I kind of love that. And for me, it took me a minute because I'll tell you, Cory, like I felt like at one point in my career when I was in the military, I was on top of the world. Like I had
Yeah.
just got promoted. My mentors and peers were all like, "Hey, you're going to go to the top. You're going to do amazing things." And when this happened, like I said, it was very devastating. But now that I've climbed, I would say out of that hole, and starting to build, my own mission, my own movement, it hits me sometimes, and I have to remind, like, you were that guy when you were doing what you were already doing before this moment.
Yeah.
Like you were that guy, regardless of what the lie that was being told or how things, transpired. You were that guy at whatever it is that you were doing. And
Yeah.
it's just unfortunate that, we go through these experiences that, like we said, are preparation for, the future, the vision and what we're going to be doing. But you have to constantly remind yourself, I'm that guy, like
Yeah.
I'm capable of that. So, yeah, man.
100%. 100%. So that makes me want to bring up woundedness
Mhm.
because we all carry wounds.
For sure.
And I think we're all at some point or another, we try to build a dream on an unhealed wound,
Mm,
which is kind of like building a house on a crooked foundation.
right.
At
For
some
sure.
point, without healing the wound, it will fall over.
For sure.
I think that appears in some ways in our lives, like a try and a fail, a try and a fail, or being stuck in a loop. I can never get
Mm,
past. I
for
can only
sure.
go far, and so some of those wounds are those limiting beliefs that we all carry. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I don't deserve it. I'm not capable. I'm not enough. I'm not perfect. I'm not significant. I'm not safe.
Right.
Whatever those things are, when we believe that about ourselves, which I believe none of those are true, by the way. The good
Right.
news about the
Right.
sabotaging beliefs is they are not true.
Sure. For
Our
sure.
story of our circumstance and nothing more. And as we work with our clients and say, okay, let's get past that. Of course you deserve it. Of course you're worthy. Of course you're capable.
Right.
Rise to that highest part of ourselves when we heal, when we remember that it was a story that we told and it's a story that we can change and retell in a new way.
For sure.
And that's our expansion,
Yeah.
and healing. I love that healing is not a destination, it is a choice we make every day. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah, it is. No, man, I literally we posted and talked about it, earlier today when I talked about healing, being a lifestyle. It's a journey, and it's a journey you have to commit to, right? And when I say commit, like marriage, right? I'm committed to you. I'm convicted in my beliefs about what we're doing. I'm in love with. I literally tell people like I'm in love with the process of becoming,
Me
because
too.
it's in the process of becoming that you discover, you learn, you identify, you heal, right? You just all the things that you need, you find the ingredients to heal yourself. And once you have fully healed yourself, similar to what Lisa was saying, all right, I'm no longer living in my story. I have stepped out of my story and I'm standing on the box of my story. and I'm helping others from my experience because
Yeah.
I know what it's like to be, where exactly where you are. I understand all of the emotions, right? The fears,
Yeah.
the limiting beliefs. I understand them all because I too have experienced them. But if you will allow, take my hand, and that's what I tell people. Like I just extend an invitation, right? If we kind of go back to the kind of the church analogy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I just kind of extend an invitation and say, hey, come join me, and I can guarantee you that if you join me, your life and your business will transform, and all the passions and desires that you want, they can be yours. You can manifest those things, and so I just learned to extend an invitation, and then those who accept the invitation, we have a magical ride, and then those who reject it, hey, we hope you figure out or find whatever it is you're looking for.
Right. There's one more little golden nugget of shamanism that's popping in since I brought that up a minute ago. And it applies to the human condition of everywhere because once again, when we're healing and we heal, we've dealt with some shadow work, we've made some progress, we've arrived at a new platform.
Right.
It's not nirvana because the next round of challenges are handed to you. And so we go again.
Yeah.
We go again.
Yeah. Well, it's I tell
Yeah.
people, Cory, for me, it's you got to develop a warrior's mentality, right? If you can take whatever you're currently believing, whatever you're currently facing, you have to look at that thing that you're facing and your beliefs as if I am a warrior. And
Yeah.
whatever we're going to face, I'm already equipped because I'm in a constant state of exercising, sharpening my sword, and getting my axe prepared. Right. And so, and that's why I tell people, like, you have to surround yourself with other warriors.
Oh, yeah,
Otherwise, when you
absolutely.
go into battle, you're going to be defeated.
Right. And I talk about warriors a lot in my
Yeah.
work. And there's two other words that go with warrior, and it's tender, heart, and
Okay.
warrior.
Yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
takes tender to understand, to lead and follow with your heart. It takes
Absolutely.
to hold up the values of a warrior, and it takes warrior to be tender in a really hard situation.
Absolutely.
And that's important.
For
Yeah.
sure. For sure.
But I think what we'll start to wrap up our talk with is that there's these three steps of shamanism or these three steps of healing, and the first step is to be decided.
Mm.
Because you will, and part of that being decided, maybe you're hurting too much, you finally are willing to change.
Mm.
Finally, where the pain of change is now less than the pain of staying where you are,
For
which
sure.
means it's okay not to be okay.
Right.
Because in the okay not to be okay, that's where the search begins.
Gotcha.
It's where you start to read the menu for the first time. So that first one is, to be decided, I'm going to heal, I'm going to expand, I'm going to change, I'm going to make my dream come true.
Yeah.
The second one is to lead and follow with your heart,
Sure.
because most of us are too practiced at leading with our head, and our heart is ready to talk and lead and take us home. And then
Right.
the third one is to stay the course, because you will be challenged.
Right.
All the old parts of you that kept you safe in the past are going to try to do it again.
Correct. For sure.
This is where we heal. This is the shadows, the black bags. This is where
Yeah.
we actually do the healing.
Yeah.
So love that. Like, be decided, follow with your heart, and stay the course.
For sure.
I think that's good wisdom for all of us.
Yeah. No, brother. I mean, I think the experience, the human experience, it is the most fascinating thing. I'm happy that I'm a human. I'm happy I'm not a cow, horse, or even a plant or a bug. Like, the human journey is the most fascinating thing for me, because you get to experience, and I'm sure infinite, right? Every person brings with them an infinite, number of experiences and thoughts and beliefs and just things with them.
Mhm.
And if you're open and willing to receive whatever you need to receive from that experience, I think that's, to me, that's the journey. Like, that's the process where No matter if it's a complete stranger or someone you've chatted with a couple of times, you're open and willing to receive whatever you're supposed to get out of that experience, and just enjoy the journey, man. Yeah, just enjoy the journey.
100% choose joy.
Yeah.
Because when we choose life, life chooses us.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, Jay, let our listeners know a little bit about how to find you. Well, of course, I'll have Jay's information in the show notes, everybody. But Jay, let us know how can people find you?
Yeah, man, just on all social media platforms. If you type in Jay Jackson Disruptive Leadership, I guarantee you I'm going to pop up.
Yeah.
As that is what we're all about here. We're all about, and I want people to understand that disruption doesn't necessarily mean destruction. Disruption is change, it's growth, it's innovation. And so we're just on a little mission to transform 10 billion lives. I know we don't have that many people on the planet right now, but I do believe that we can achieve this mission even after, you and I, Cory, are transitioned on. And so we're building this movement and the infrastructure and the talent behind it to see it manifest itself and come to reality. And so I just hope whatever happens to my spirit when it's all over, I hope I can take a glimpse and say, okay, they're still doing good work.
Well, I'm honored to be in the movement with you as a colleague, as a brother, as a leader, as a tenderhearted warrior, and a sensitive human.
Yeah,
Just trying to be a good human.
for sure. For sure. For sure.
Jay, thank you for everybody. Jay's contact information will be in the show notes. As we wrap it up, I want you all to know out there that my journey, Jay's journey, our journey is not that much different than yours. There was a time when we felt trapped, stuck in fear, doubt, patterns, beliefs that held us back. And we repeated some of those same mistakes until we learned not to. It's not about right or wrong. It's just what you're doing. Change is not out of reach. You're doing it already. If you're listening to this right now and there's something sparking in your belly, that means the change is already happening inside you. So I encourage you to look where it is happening more powerfully than to look where it's not. That being said, thanks, Jay, for being with me on Fear to Freedom, one story at a time. And like I said before, I know when I was with you a couple of weeks ago, I made a friend for life. I believe that even more now. I can't wait to take you to the red deserts of Utah.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on. And yeah, I'm looking forward to do you do Jeeping or anything, Cory?
I have done some. I don't own a Jeep, but the
Okay.
whole Jeep thing in Utah is a
Yeah,
big
yeah,
deal.
yeah. It is a big deal.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun, the four-wheeling, that's a pretty cool way to experience the desert.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I've done Jeeping once while out in Utah, but I definitely want to take some other little toys out there and enjoy myself at least once while I'm out there again.
One of the things I love out here is the hot springs, where
Ah,
the hot tubs that just appear out of the middle of nowhere.
yeah. Yeah, I'm down with that too. Yeah, I'm all open to all of that.
Right on, brother. Well, thanks everybody. Jay Jackson, once again, good to be with you, my friend. And those of you out there, if you're resonating with Jay, reach out to him. And you can always find me in the links as well. I'm Cory Threewing, and this has been another episode of Fear to Freedom. Thanks, everybody. Well.